Oh, France is burning down right now. Yikes. Okay, well, I was not expecting to learn that today. Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me book club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Hannah Rossell.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to Elizabethan England, and then a bunch of other places. But, published July 10th, 2012, Shadow of Night is the second installment in the All Souls trilogy, which I'm curious why it's the All Souls trilogy, but we'll see what happens in the third book. This time, Matthew and Diana have gone back in time to try to help Diana learn her magic, as well as locate Ashmole, that's how that's pronounced, 72.
I think so.
But in a world where witches are being burnt at the stake and an insidious vampire runs London, will they survive this new world to even make it back to theirs? I will give all of my thoughts on the time period Matthew picked later, but to start off, we need a couple of notes from the past book. Apparently that is good wine.
Oh, yeah.
We were like, that sounds disgusting. That's the worst. I asked, and it was like, nope, that's good. That's good wine. That's what good wine tastes like. And it's like, oh, maybe I wouldn't like wine.
Good's a relative experience.
How high is the alcohol content in this?
I don't know.
I feel like it would need to be higher.
Yes.
But yes, that's apparently good wine. Second of all, my sister-in-law recommended this book series. And she was very excited for me to finally be reading it, and I read the first book, and I saw her, and I was like, well, great, I'm gonna have to not really say what I thought about it, because I don't want to hurt her feelings, because apparently I have a tendency to hate people's favorite books.
Yeah.
And possibly ruin them for them. So I didn't want to do that to her, because she loves it. It's her favorite series ever, and that's why I'm reading it. So I went up to her, and she's like, oh, so you finished the book, what'd you think? And I was kind of like, and she's like, it's boring, isn't it? Are you kidding me?
Self-awareness.
I was like, yes, it is, but what do you mean by that? And she's like, well, I want people to read the series, and the first book is boring. And she's like, anytime I tell someone the first book is boring, but the rest is great, they're like, I'm not reading the series.
That's fair. She's learned.
I feel lied to. I have been bamboozled. But okay.
She's good at it. She got us.
See, the thing that always happens with that, anytime it's a series with really long books, and it's like, oh, the first book's terrible, but it gets so much better. How did you guys make it through the first book? How are there people to be getting through the series like, oh yeah, the first book's terrible, but I kept reading, and it got better?
Yeah, how do you read a first book of a series, and you're like, wow, that sucked. Let me read the next one.
Let me read all of them.
What makes you want to do that if you don't have someone being like, it gets better, I promise? If I read a book, and I don't like the first one, I'm just like, no.
Do we just have a perpetual chain here of people being like, I swear it gets better, please read more? Is that how these series are surviving?
I guess, maybe. Or maybe someone like really loved the first one.
Apparently they have good ratings on Goodreads. I'm confused. Anyway, so all I knew about this one going in is that she likes how the time travel system works.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
She describes it kind of like train cars, which helps, but to clarify, in this author's opinion, time travel is you go back to the past and you replace yourself. There are no duplicates of yourself there. You take over your body, basically, and then when you go back, the old you takes over.
Yeah, I wish we could see, well, maybe we do in the third book, probably not, but how that goes.
No, I've been told the third book goes back to the present.
Okay.
So maybe it does, because it's like, hey, we're back in the present talking about it, but I don't know. So I just feel like that would be very disorienting for the poor whatever person, especially after this. It is like 6 months, 7 months later from what they would remember.
Yeah, so much happened. I remember none of this.
Nothing. And you have to keep all these people away from you and not tell your secret. Anyway, I have thoughts about how these people lived their 7 months, but that's beside the point.
We'll get there.
So this is age level adult, and for our content warning, let me get some breath. Sexism, racism, blood, language, nudity, sexual assault, rape, suicide, self-harm, graphic violence, sex, pregnancy, death of a parent, miscarriage, child abuse mentioned, murder, kidnapping, graphic violence, and torture.
Yep.
Good thing I got that breath control from years of band. I swear that's the only way I make it through some of these content warnings.
It is quite the list.
It's a lot. And I almost feel the need to speed through them. It's so many.
Yeah.
It's like a car commercial. Trying to say the legal stuff as quickly as possible.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, so once again, we can do a judge a book by its cover for you, but I have the trilogy compilation cover on Kindle book. And so it just says All Souls Trilogy, really big, and it has a blue background. And then it has the 3 books, but they're tiny. They're absolutely minuscule, so I can't judge the book.
Yeah, they're tiny, but I did a mix of audiobook and reading it when I had time, just because I can put the audiobook to faster than I can read.
Yeah, so all I could really tell was that there was a sun, you have the font, and then it was purple and then blue circles. I couldn't really see.
Yeah, it looks like, granted, I don't really know the terms, but like maybe some sort of like celestial chart with stars on it. It sort of mimicked the circle thing you saw at the beginning of each section.
Yeah, so even trying to look it up on Google, there's no good. Okay, let's leave it to Amazon to have the clearest one.
Of course.
Yeah, it does kind of look like star charts, but also
It sort of looks like the thing at the beginning of each section.
oh, I think it has Da Vinci's. What does it actually call?
Oh, does it?
Thank you, Google, for understanding what I meant there. The Vitruvian Man.
Oh, yeah.
Except it doesn't have multiple arms or legs, but it does look like that in the middle there.
It sort of does.
Yeah, so there's star charts. Yeah, because there you have the symbols for Venus and Mercury.
And then there's London down at the bottom, so all the smog and smoke from London is making the purple background. That's kind of cool.
I have to say, whoever does the cover art for it is very talented.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not surprised Penguin Publishing is able to afford such niceties.
Oh, I'm not shocked at all.
There are covers for the TV version.
Oh.
Which is apparently a Sky original. I don't even know what that means. What is Sky? But I still think Matthew looks eh. The actress has a much better facial expression on this book. She actually kind of looks like what I would think Diana would look like. They did better, I think.
Yeah, I still think the hair color's wrong.
Well, I mean, it's red, although it looks short, but maybe she just has it up.
It looks like it's up.
Yeah, but it's so much better than A Discovery of Witches.
Oh, yeah. I'm just not a big fan of Matthew, the actor.
I agree.
That's not how I imagine him in my head. I don't know how I imagine him, but it's not that.
I think my problem is I think of him as sharper features.
Yeah, very much more like defined and sharp.
And he just has really kind of soft features, even though he has kind of a square head. Maybe it's just the angles that the books are, but it looks rather round for a square face.
Rather round for a square, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would even be able to think of anything about the book, even if I saw it.
I would be like, there's a city and circles.
Circles. Yeah, there's celestial stuff going on, and look, there's a sun.
I wouldn't think it has anything to do with witches. I mean, other than the fact that the cover says A Discovery of Witches at the top, so you know it's related to that book.
Yeah, author of.
But if Shadow of Night in that title and the picture does not make me think of witches.
Yeah, although they definitely go into the celestial stuff more, but I don't know if it was enough to devote the whole cover to. But if you weren't going to devote the whole cover to it, what are you even going to have?
Yeah.
It's so much better than the ones that are just whiffs of smoke. A Discovery of Witches is black with red whiffs, and Shadow of Night is red with black whiffs, and then the Book of Life is white with black and red whiffs.
Ooh, fancy. We got 3 colors going.
I guess it's supposed to represent Diana and
Matthew.
But it's kind of mixed up because I feel like red would be Diana and it's, Discovery of Witches. But I feel like that book was way more about vampires and this book was way more about witches.
Yeah, I feel like we got into each of the races a little bit more in this book.
Except Damon. Screw Damon's.
Yeah, really not that much. Maybe the 3rd book will. Or they're just little side characters.
Yeah, I have been told we learn more about them. I don't know what that means. Maybe the 3rd book is Damon's. That's what this is. That's what the trilogy is. That's my hope a little bit. Because like I said, that is the most... Although, if we want to get into the discussion here, I appreciate her magic system. That is actually a little bit more innovative.
I did think that was really cool. I really like how she explained that.
I am all for anything that's like magic is tying knots in threads because I crochet.
Yeah, and how each different thing has different colors so you can see the connections between it. I thought that was really cool.
I also like anything where it's like, webbing where we're all connected to something.
Yeah. So what you're saying is if you were a witch, you would be a weaver and you would just crochet all your spells.
Heck yeah. There we go. It's this one in the Circle of Magic where weaving is a magic of its own. And I'm like, yes, it is. Thank you.
Finally, the recognition it deserves.
But if we want to stay on track, we don't get to learn that until part 3.
Yeah, it takes a really long time. I feel like we didn't learn a lot about Diana for a very long time. And I was like, isn't this whole thing about her?
And then it's just dogpiled.
We're going to talk about Matthew and his issues for a little bit. And it's like, God.
Yeah, but Matthew keeps making stupid decisions. Okay, first of all, in the last book, it ends, Matthew doesn't tell Diana where they're going until about the time that they're going there. I still do not understand why he did this. But we spent the entire last book having stupid things where Diana would do stuff and Matthew was always right. And I feel like in this book, Matthew keeps doing stuff, but Diana's always right. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, we switched.
He's like, oh, let me take you back to this time period. It's perfect. Except for there are burning witches everywhere and I'm part of the congregation and Queen Elizabeth's spy and I have to do all that. And oh, by the way, we still don't know where the book is. And the burning witches is happening more now. And oh, all these people are getting upset that you're a witch. Why? Why this time period? Why?
Perfect time to go back to. Perfect choice, Matthew.
There is nothing about this time period that made sense for them to go to. Nothing. By the time they get there, they very quickly are like, oh, this was a terrible time period. Well, we're stuck because we have no idea how to get back.
Yeah, why did he pick that time?
And you get back to the past and Dinah's like, they're burning witches. And Matthew's like, it's having in Scotland. It's not here. Bruh.
Yeah, I was like, Matthew.
This is not that far away. This is a hop, skip, and a jump.
It's just Scotland.
Scotland, that's like right next door and may very easily teach that England, hey, this is a good idea. That one?
Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
He's part of the congregation. Why? Why this time period? Nothing makes sense about this. And he has a lover, which this book, because we were reading the last book and there was like, oh, Kit, and oh, it seems like they were really close. And we were like, is she implying here that Marlowe was in love with Matthew here? That's a pretty big thing to say about a real live person.
Yeah.
I may or may not be boycotting all of Marlowe's work. I hate him, and I hate how dumb Diana and Matthew are around him.
Can you not see? And they were like so shocked. I don't want to jump ahead, but like when he did the thing, and they're like, oh, how could you? And I was like, how could you be so blind, Diana and Matthew? Good grief.
We start off in Woodstock. And so you meet the School of Night crew, which I do a little bit appreciate. There is a member of the School of Night named Matthew Royden, and he's a mysterious figure and the least known about. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Christopher Marlowe's there, and he hates Diana immediately because imagine if you were dating someone, and then all of a sudden they pop up one day and they're like, oh, I'm married.
Yeah, I'd be pretty mad.
And it's not like dating because that wouldn't have been legal at the time period, but it's basically dating. They're all like, oh, they're lovers. Okay, all we actually get, so I don't hear anything about them doing stuff together. Apparently they go to Ladies of the Night, shall we? Together, which is probably pretty close to what it is. But yeah, this is a horrible decision. He's so freaking jealous, and it just... This is dumb. This was a horrible decision. Why did you bring her here first? Why are you introducing her to all your friends? And all they do in the first part is introduce everyone, and Matthew's just like, Kit, I'm married to Diana. You can't be mean to her, except he totally lets him be mean to her all the time.
Yeah.
I would be so mad if my husband was letting someone talk to me like Marlowe talks to Diana.
Matthew did not redeem himself in this book. I'm just going to say that.
No.
I'm still not a big fan of him after this book, for many reasons, that being one of them. I get you and Kit had whatever in the past. That's fine. Do your thing. But just because you had a soft spot for him does not mean you need to let him treat your wife like crap.
It's so stupid.
And I know he doesn't want to like go and mess up the dynamic for like 16th century Matthew comes back, but still.
But he totally does!
He totally does.
That's the first thing he does. And I hate it. And they're like, oh, Diana's from Oxford. And they're like, she has a weird accent because, normal person versus 16th century person. And Marlowe's like, oh, she's either from the New World or Africa. And I'm like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
She's from the New World. She's from Virginia. It's fine. Just be like, hey, she's from this area. But no, she's from Oxford. She's from London.
Yeah, they couldn't just roll with it and be like, yeah, she is from the New World. Because she is. She literally is.
She literally is. It would have been fine. But no, she has to be an English woman and pass as an English woman. And she doesn't want to even leave the house until she doesn't cause any issues being out of the house. And it was just, this is a terrible idea. Why are we here?
They start this whole time travel thing with like, we can't make any ripples in history. End up being like, ha ha ha, never mind.
Hey guys, this is my wife. Buddies, pals, amigos, friends of mine.
And then he has no facial hair, so they're like, Matthew, do you feel okay?
I don't understand why they went and he introduced him to his friends. This is a horrible idea.
For someone so smart, Matthew was really dumb.
This whole book he was dumb. And it's just like last book. The whole book Diana was dumb.
For two very smart individuals, y'all are really dumb.
And you have terrible communication. And you shouldn't be married. Oh, by the way, they're not married. We'll get there, but
there was so much going on.
Everything Matthew does in this book bothers me.
So we have the anti-Hastings club. Now we have the anti-Matthew club because he bothers me.
All of his decisions are bad. And they come back to this time period and he's just chilling with his friends and tells them he's from the future.
Yes, and then Diana's just like, I know this Matthew is gonna be different because we're in a different time. I'm like, Diana, he's still treating you very poorly. Girl, it is the same Matthew. Him being in a whole different time setting.
Oh, he's just slipped back into that 16th century mindset. I'm like, oh, you mean the one that happened 500 years ago? There's been time. It's just like when people are like, oh, they're old. They don't understand. Like, they were from a different time. They lived through the times. They lived through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Plenty of time to change. No.
Yeah, quit giving him the benefit of the doubt.
He's still responsible for his actions.
He's a whole adult. Man, he's centuries old at this point.
Oh, they're so patriarchal, blah, 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 which annoyed me enough. And it was like, oh, but he's also 16th century Matthew. Shut up.
It is not 16th century Matthew. That's literally the whole premise of the time traveling is it's not 16th century Matthew. Because if it worked that way, you'd be dead.
A week ago, you were in the 21st century, but oh no, he just slots back into it. I'm going to allow this to happen. It's just,
It happened a little too easily for it to be like, not just right below the surface.
His mindset is clearly still right there.
Oh yes. I was like, this was a little too comfortable for you, Mr. Matthew.
And I am a very independent person. I realize that. I do have the privilege of living in the 21st century and can be as independent as I want to. Diana, what the crap?
Yes.
This whole 33-year-old woman out here making excuses for her man to treat her like trash.
Yeah. Communication who? Don't know her.
So, yeah, they just hang out for a month. That's all that happens. And granted, I really like some of the intrigue. It felt more interesting to be like, oh, there are these people, but oh no, the neighbors are thinking we're weird, and we asked this witch to come by, but now she thinks you're of the devil, and now the priests are like, she seems suspicious, maybe we should do a trial. All this building up, and it's like,
and they just run away.
And I was fine with that. I'm skipping a lot of stuff. I was fine with running away because that felt like the best decision here.
Yeah, it did.
And by the way, this is when Diana's figuring out all this stuff about him. He's a spy for England. He's part of the congregation. He's part of the School of Night. All of this stuff. And I'm like, all of this would have been great to know ahead of time.
Yeah, you didn't think of sharing some of this, Matthew?
No, none of it.
Letting her freak out.
Vampires have to keep their secrets. Shut up.
Maybe if you were concerned about the accent, you should have practiced before going.
Yeah. And once again, the time period. He's part of the congregation. He knows the congregation is turning their back on witches, allowing for the witch trials to happen and take place. And it's happened in Scotland. It hasn't happened in America yet. And you know it's going to get worse. Why did he pick this time period?
Ugh. Matthew, I have questions.
And they're just hiding things from each other constantly.
Once again, communication who?
Yeah. And they're like, oh, we need to find her a witch tutor. And Marlowe's like, oh, we need to find a guy or whatever. And he mentions one of them is an alchemist looking for a witch to help him. And I'm like, I don't care if it came from Marlowe and he's being sexist. That's actually a great idea. That would have been perfect.
Yeah.
No.
Really would have been. No. But it came from Marlowe, so no.
So they asked this random lady, this widow, and like I said, it doesn't work out.
Widow beaten. Beacon beaten.
Beaten.
I was right.
Oh, and apparently this is when Diana drops that Sarah hates witches that don't study.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been nice to know. Now I have questions because later you find out that she's a weaver and that her dad was a weaver. And I'm like, did Sarah hate your dad? Was this one of the reasons you were like, hey, Sarah, I'm not chill with you? Where was any of this last book?
Yeah, I'm like, is Sarah one of the witches doesn't like weavers?
Yeah, and that could have been an interesting dynamic, but no, she was just, no. And we still don't get that family dynamic. We still don't know how she feels about the dad.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, Widow Beaton doesn't like her. And Diana's like, oh, it's because I don't pass for Elizabethan. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure she would have pulled that on you even if you did.
Yeah.
So she makes a scene, and then the priest and like two other people. And so we got three people just hanging out and being like, hey, Diana, we want to question you and maybe put you on trial. And they are suspicious of Matthew. And so Diana's like, oh no, they know you're a vampire. And he's like, no, they know I'm a spy. And I was just like, cue your James Bond moment.
The James Bond theme just starts playing in the background.
You're James Bond. He's not a hat maker. I loved that joke. Sorry, reference. Apparently there's a James Bond that's a hat maker. And Diana was like, oh my gosh, you're a spy. You're James Bond. And one of the other guys, I think it's George, pipes up, he's not a hat maker.
Yes.
He's not James Bond. What are you talking about?
That made me chuckle. That was a good one.
I love the members of the School of Night, and I'm really sad we get to see significantly less of them after this one.
I know. I was like, oh, I wanted more of them.
So Widow Beaton is spreading these rumors, right? But so is Kit.
Yeah.
And you know what they do about it?
Nothing.
Nothing. They put up with it.
They're just like, oh, Kit. That's just Kit.
And so they were like, Kit, leave. And I was like, oh, they're kicking him out of the house. There's consequences. Oh my gosh, drama. No, they're kicking him out of the room so they can talk.
Just screaming internally.
Oh yeah, but the thing is, so they run away from the trials, right? But they didn't really leave because of the possible witch trial. They leave because Matthew's dad is like, hey, I think you're dead, and if you don't show up, okay, I didn't really get the consequences. If you don't come here, I come to you. And they made it seem like a really big deal, but...
Yeah. Would that have been such a big deal? I don't really know.
Looking back at it, she made it a really big deal. Oh, and also, finally, someone calls him out for it. He's part of the congregation, but he's a spy for Queen Elizabeth. So she calls him out for being a part of politics.
Yeah, the whole, like, you can't dabble in politics. And Matthew's like, psh, try me.
That's all I do, is dabble in politics. So I'm so glad Diana's like, hey, you're dabbling in politics.
Isn't that a thing we're not supposed to do?
And as a member of the congregation.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the section, part 1, there's a weird time blip moment where Diana had a book and she was writing in it, and then we go to the future and they find that book.
Yes, I liked how those were sprinkled throughout. Towards the end, usually, of each section, it would go back to the present to show how they've started influencing things. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So, part 2 is there in France. And apparently this is where he truly transforms into his old self. And I'm like, cool. So he's even less of a catch. Great. I'm so glad this is basically Roommate's book.
Moody King.
Moody Prince.
Yes.
He is a prince. Let's get that straight. He is no king. I like the dad character.
Yes. Philippe. I really liked him.
He had his act together. He has every right to act like everyone around him stupid. He knows what's going on.
I think Philippe has to be one of my favorite characters.
He's the best.
Truly.
He just is. And I'm sad that we won't see him again, probably.
Yeah. Now I see why Isabel really liked him.
Yes. I like her more for it.
Yeah, it gave me some insight into her as well. It's like, oh, okay. It's a good thing she didn't show up in this book, though.
And that's the thing. The more you learn about him, there's no way he would have had a little subservient wife that they keep trying to be like, oh yeah, vampires, blah, 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 blah. No. They clashed heads. She's not there because they're in the middle of arguing about something something, so she's living somewhere else. Subservient BS.
Definitely not.
I feel like that was just such a toxic mother-in-law thing that Yezebo said to her. She's like, oh, you have to be subservient to your husband because, patriarchy, but she herself isn't.
Yeah, it applies to everyone but her.
Yeah, it just felt like a toxic mother-in-law thing to say.
Yeah, I think really before Diana grew on her.
So Felipe's like, hey, you have to come here, and they do. And he is a bit of a jerk in the beginning. Like, they have to go 4 days on horseback in November to get to him as soon as possible because he's throwing this hissy fit.
Yes, as grown men do.
That is ridiculous. 4 days on horseback. 1 day on horseback in November. Granted, let me think. Where is France? Not where is France, sorry. Where is France on the latitude?
I mean, from my understanding, it was pretty chilly.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be cold no matter what. It's November, and it's in the North Hemisphere. I'm not going to say no matter what. But we finally get there, and Matthew. Remember when we were like, hey, saying I love you means you're married and vampire is stupid? Well, that's because it is, and Matthew was lying.
It is.
He's been lying this whole time.
Yeah, because he has a fear of commitment.
You didn't have to say you were married. Diana was like, holy crap, I didn't know I'm married, but I guess now that I'm here, I don't mind. That is not the same thing. But it's so stupid. Because Felipe's like, no, you're not married. First of all, you didn't get married. And Diana's like, well, we signed a thing in whatever. And Felipe's like, not counting that in the typical father-in-law way of, no, you have to have a fancy wedding.
Philippe was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
But also, he's like, you haven't consummated the marriage. And yes.
Yeah, Sept-Tours was really just talking about Matthew's trauma and Diana just being the emotional labor of working him through it. I understand that vampires and witches can't really go to therapy, but your wife, Matthew, really?
Oh my gosh. It's a little bit hard because, yes, you should be able to rely on your partner. And I rely on my husband for emotional labor for stuff because I have trauma and mental illness. But
that's fair, yeah. There's a line that typical healthy reliance for emotional support.
I realize he's not a emotional expert.
Yeah.
Or he's not a therapist. He is not trained in this, and I realize that. And I don't mind him leaning on her with his tragedies. I mind how she had to draw it out of him.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. I hate that she had to get it out of him and do so much work. This is someone you've chosen to spend the rest of her life with you.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like she world-builded vampires and she was just like patriarchy and toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we could talk about how men are told not to show their weaknesses and even towards their wives or women and stuff. And I've heard how some men are like, I don't cry because people have made fun of me, including women, being like, you need to be a man.
Yes.
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's the pattern I don't like. Everything she learns about him, she has to drag it out of him. She had to drag out, they're going to the time period that he's part of School of Night, that he's a part of a congregation, that he has an obligation to Queen Elizabeth. All extremely pertinent information.
Yeah, it's not just little things.
Yeah, and we had the reverse problem last book when Diana was like, why haven't you told me about your dead son? And we were like, excuse you? You have known this man for not a month. You aren't owed all of this.
Yeah.
But the problem is not that he needs to tell her his trauma even, but he's taking it out on her.
Yeah.
In this book, which is what the whole part is stop taking out your tragedies on Diana.
Yeah.
Either tell her about it and be able to move past it slowly, but in a way where you're not taking it out on her because it is unhealthy, but it's not great.
They're either one extreme of demanding information, the first book.
Demanding it, not deserving it, demanding it.
And then the second book is begging for information because it's really important to what's going on.
Which I will say, bonus points to Diana for not demanding the information and going to the church and just holding him.
She showed a lot of growth. Good for her.
But yeah, so this is a lot about Matthew.
Part 2, Matthew's trauma dump.
Yeah, I will say, she's got some lines that really get me. And and I love it. So Diana figures out that, hey, we're supposed to consummate the marriage. And Felipe's like, well, if you're going to get married, we're having a wedding. This is happening right now. And so Diana confronts Matthew and is like, hey, what the heck? Let's talk about this. What does this involve? And we get to this part of the conversation, not paraphrasing, but these are exact quotes. It's not so simple. And then Diana responds, Felipe thinks it's simple. And Matthew says, then bed him.
Yes.
I gotta give it to him. That was a really good shot. Diana's gonna win the war here, but dang.
But that was a good one. Props to you, Matthew. You tried. You still lost, but...
Pats for Patrick. That was good. That was so good. And they had a very realistic fighting scene. And they just need to work on their communication so bad.
I feel like getting one of those couple self-help books that just talks about healthy communication would make these things so much easier for them.
They're terrible. And it's just... yikes.
Very frustrating.
Anyway, so the part we were kind of referencing is Felipe's like, hey, if you want to know why he's being all upset, you should totally go to this church at this time of day. And so she does, and she's there, and she's like, hey, I know you've always been a jerk to me. My paraphrasing, she doesn't say that. But you've been extra crappy to me lately. What's up? And Matthew reveals that it's Lucas's birthday and that they're buried under the church. And Diana's like, oh my gosh, how did I never know this? And I'm like, crazy what knowing someone for more than a month will do.
Shocking.
Surprise.
Who would have ever thought? Not Diana, clearly.
But then, okay, so all this props we're giving for her, but she holds it against Matthew that Blanca was pregnant when they got married.
Very weird. I think she's jealous.
He had a child with her. It was weird only because she's like, well, you slept with her before you got married. Weird. And he also lost both his wife and his child. It's like life events change how you view things.
Yes.
It's a very toxic, gross mindset because guys use that all the time. Like, well, you slept with them. You should sleep with me. Or, well, you let me sleep with you one time. Why can't we do it this time? That's such a gross, toxic mindset. And she also views Matthew's mourning as Blanca still having a hold on him. You can't replace someone. And it's her mentality like, oh, he needs to be in love with me, not her. If you can't handle that, you can't physically replace someone in your heart. He's always going to have feelings for her.
Yeah.
Don't date a widow if you can't handle that.
Yeah, especially not an immortal widow.
We gave her so much grace, but
she still is problematic sometimes.
She's still being gross out here toward his dead wife and child. And you also learned that Matthew, I don't know if you knew in the last book that he killed Felipe, but you knew he died.
But then you figure out how he died, and it was an act of mercy, ultimately.
Yeah, so Felipe asked Matthew to kill him because he was in such a bad place. And to do that, Matthew had to drink his blood, which means he drank Felipe's memories. And so all of that and guilt he feels about killing Felipe, but now he's here with him and he can't tell him that he dies, and all of that stuff is going on. All of it is fair. Not a reason to be rude to your wife, but all of it fair.
Yeah, that is very overwhelming, and knowing what he has yet to face.
Yeah, it's hard.
Still not a reason to be a jerk.
You can't use it as an excuse to be a jerk to people, but I can see why he was angry and having issues with his temper. I do not think that keeps him from the lies he told Diana, and I'm still mad about it. I love you means we're married. Ugh.
In what world? Why would you ever think they're that simple?
Although I will say, so they're in the church when all this is happening, and after all his confessions and stuff, Matthew sees a white dove appear in the church, and then it loses a feather on the grave area that they are. That would be really reassuring for a devoted Catholic.
That would.
For anyone who doesn't know, a white dove is what appeared after Jesus was baptized as a sign of this is a good.
Yes.
So that's the reference they're referencing there. That would be very reassuring for a devoted Catholic, which apparently does help. They don't ever bring that up again, but I think that helped him a lot.
Yeah, I feel like the whole Matthew is a devoted Catholic thing just gets brought up and then just is forgotten again.
Devoted, in quotes.
Or at least was.
In the time period, I don't know if he's still, like you said, it's not really brought up, except for in this time period. I don't even know if I knew he was Catholic in the last book.
I just think it was just, here's this little bit of lore for you, and then never mentioned again.
Yeah. But supposedly at this time period, he is a devoted Catholic. And maybe he's one of those people like in his heart he's devoted.
Yeah, when he needs comfort.
Yeah, and it's just always in the back of his head or something. So I don't know. That doesn't come up again, really, like you said.
Yeah.
Other than to be like, but you're a spy for Queen Elizabeth and you're triple spying everybody.
Yeah.
Because Elizabeth was pro-Protestant.
He's got a lot of lies he has to keep going.
So this part confused me. I don't know if Felipe sent for him or what, but a witch is coming to the castle.
Yeah, I was unsure of how he got there.
Is he coming because he knows Diana's there? But it made it sound like they asked him to come, which turns out to be a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Chalk that up to the vampires, which makes me think it wasn't Felipe's idea, because normally he's very good. Also, he randomly just challenges his son to horse rides and armed combat. He has way too much energy.
Honestly, for someone who's as old as he is, kudos.
I mean, he's a vampire, granted, but I swear, every time we turn around, he's like, and armed combat, or horseback riding, or hunting, and it's like, oh.
He's like your father-in-law who always wants to do something, you're like, please, I just want to rest.
I'm so tired.
Please just let me rest, Philippe.
But, okay, so here's the thing. And the same thing bothered me with Yezebo. They hate wishes with a burning passion. Even in this time period, they're like, oh no, he might murder her. Let's go see him. It's fine.
Let's go see him. Haha, great idea.
They get there, and the whole time, Felipe is just being rude to her and their whole position and whatever.
Because he hates witches.
And then Whiplash, Matthew is doing the armed combat thing and gets distracted by Diana, and Matthew freaks out and starts attacking him, Pierre. But Felipe gets Matthew back and then hugs him and forgives him, and then turns around and uses his blood to make Diana a de Clermont.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, okay, bud.
The Whiplash.
Honestly.
And then he makes the staff pledge their loyalty to protecting Diana from her enemies.
Yeah, it's like, dude, I thought you hated her?
And didn't want them to be married? I don't know. So that happened.
Vampires are fickle.
Apparently. And for being such tradition, blah, 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 they turn on a dime real quick.
They really do.
And I have a question. So apparently Matthew was created by Yezebo, but Diana keeps looking for physical resemblances between Felipe and Matthew.
It's not like they're genetically related.
They're not even from the same place and time. Felipe seems to be from ancient Greece.
Yeah.
And Matthew is from this random town in France.
Why would she think they would look the same just because you use the blood?
It's not even his blood in him.
It's like asking like an adopted parent, like, why doesn't your kid look like you?
Or like trying to look for resemblances between an adopted, because it is an adoption process. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just like, Diana, please, use your brain.
You're being weird.
I can see how there's resemblance maybe in personality and stuff, because they did spend a lot of time together, but physical resemblances, no. Girl, come on.
Yeah, I could see like, oh, they gesture in the same way or something.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
But yeah, so that happens, and then the witch comes. And like I said, I'm not sure if he was supposed to help him or not. I'm still a little fuzzy on that. But he right away is like, nope, I want to steal her memories and turn her into the congregation. Rude.
And so they kill him. Well, doesn't she kill him?
Yes. The de Clermonts are very bad at finding witches.
Yes.
She stabs him with a dagger, and I have no idea how she got the dagger. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. She's just sitting there, whatever, and then all of a sudden she stabs him, and then you find out like 2 paragraphs later, oh, I stole it from Felipe. I'm like, that would have been a great show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It's like that scene got written, and she was like, oh no, how did she get the dagger, though?
That would have worked better in a movie.
Yeah.
Than, I think, a book. But I was more like, when did you get this? This author tells us literally every meal you eat. When did you get this?
Where did this come from? I'm so confused.
Yeah, so Diana stabs him, but Matthew is the one who really murders him because he snaps his neck and drinks his blood.
Yes.
And this is the point. Okay, so he is like, hey, you're part of the family now, right? So after she stabs the witch, he's like, okay, cool. We're going to do a wedding.
Yes.
Felipe, okay.
She just had to stab someone to prove her loyalty.
Her spirit, her tenacity, her moxie.
Something. He saw that stabbing and was like, yeah, I like this girl.
Yeah, so we're going to have a 3-day ancient Greek wedding.
which I did think was really fun.
Which was very fun.
I thoroughly enjoyed reading about it. I was like, this is neat.
But it definitely just felt like another moment for the author to be like, and this historical event happened. This is what a ancient Greek wedding's like.
It's like she did all this research, and then she was like, well, I read about it. I'm going to include it.
Well, she's a historian.
That's true.
I think she has let me double check this real quick. I want to say she's a doctor of history. Yeah, she is a professor of history and teaches European history and the history of science at the University of South Carolina.
Oh.
So yeah, I want to say she's a doctor.
That would make sense.
Yeah, she has her PhD from the University of California, and she studied abroad at Oxford. Everyone who went to Oxford, I swear to goodness, is obsessed with it. It must be very nice.
I guess.
I feel like every author I've read where it's like, I was at Oxford for any amount of time is like, I must write a book that is a love letter to Oxford, which I feel like that's what the first book was.
Yeah.
So she's written several things for nonfiction, like Elizabeth in London and the Scientific Revolution. So yeah, she's a doctor, Dr. Harkness. She's a well-regarded historian of science and medicine, as well as having studied alchemy, magic, and the occult. So I have no qualms with the author. I just don't like her books.
She's clearly a historian and not a author.
It's so true, because you see in this book, and I kind of love it. I wish I liked Elizabethan history more, because that's what my sister-in-law loves about it. She loves that time period, and so she loves this book because it is the shift that history has been having in the academic world from big events, big people, big moments to the small everyday man.
Yeah.
So we learn about how they dress, what shops would be there, their average day, how an Elizabethan woman would run the house, servant relations, possible things with children, and moments walking around, and historical figures. And so I will say I know more history now than when I started this book.
Maybe that was the ultimate goal.
If it was, she does a great job. She does a great job with the history. I just don't like Matthew.
Yes.
I have found my peace with Diana.
Matthew is yet to come.
I have been told the niceness of the trilogy is the first one is Matthew's always right, second one's Diana's always right, and the third one they finally act as a team.
Together.
Which is all I wanted.
They found that communication book.
They apparently steal each other's memory and blood, but that's beside the point. We'll get there. I'd hate that as a cop-out, by the way. That's such a cop-out. We have communication problems. Let's just force each other to give 100% of our memories. That's fine. Anyway, where we are.
If you can't volunteer, we'll just force it. Perfect. Healthy relationship.
Yeah.
I love it.
During these ancient Greek random stuff, Felipe takes Diana to the ruins of an Artemis temple because Artemis is the Greek word for the huntress. Diana is the Roman because the Romans asked the Greeks if they could copy their homework, and the Greeks were like, yeah, just don't make it too obvious.
Just change it a little.
And that's what they did with every religion around them. Except for Isis. They kept the name. And Apollo. Anyway, there are certain ones that they kept the name of it. That is beside the point.
They tried not to make it too obvious that it didn't work well.
Stupid Apollo. If we want to talk about the Greek gods that I hate. So he takes her to the ruins and gives an offering to her. And apparently Diana and Matthew had been talking about having children because that's, I don't know, the whole point of something about the book. And Matthew is for it, but doesn't think it's possible. But Diana thinks it's possible, but thinks it's way too soon for it. I mean, fair.
Yeah.
I would like to know the person I am having a child with for more than a month and a half, or 2 months at this point. But while at the temple, Felipe talks about how he wants his bloodline to be continued. And so Diana takes that and she's like, okay, I'm ready to have kids.
Yeah, big change of heart there.
But Matthew's not his blood son. First of all, it's weird for that to actually work. I feel like that's every in-law's dream, mother-in-law, father-in-law, to be like, but I want you to have kids. And for the kid to turn around and be like, oh, I should have kids.
Yes.
So that's a little weird. But also, like I said, it wouldn't continue his bloodline. I guess they're being semantic about it, but it was weird.
I want you to continue the thought of my bloodline.
I guess I'm being a little bit technical. Anyway, it was weird. It was a weird scene for Diana to be like, yes, babies. So there's a Friday feast, but they're having this weird thing because the calendar is weird because I did not know this. France and England were running on different calendars for a while because France had adopted, I think the Catholic Church had changed the Catholic calendar, and England's like, we're not about that life anymore.
So there's like 10 extra days or something like that.
It's a good amount of days because they lose like half a month going into France.
Yeah. And then they gain it back later.
Yeah. So we get 2 Christmases.
Woohoo.
But yeah, so there's all these extra things like you can have the feast on Friday, but you're not allowed to have meat or cheese or milk. And Felipe's like, fine. But tomorrow we feast. Felipe gives her family jewelry, so she looks super pretty. And I think they had a dress made because she's been wearing his sister's clothes.
Yeah, she's a delightful person.
She's dumb as a pile of rocks. Anyway, he gives her family jewels and, oh, you should keep them and blah, 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 blah. It's a good moment.
It was very sweet. I really think that was my favorite part of the book. Well, one of my favorite parts.
The wedding is very nice.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
So they get married in both French and English, and there's a feast and then dancing, blah, 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 blah. And so afterwards, Matthew is like, yes, we're going to consummate the marriage. And I have to admit, she's describing all the layers of Elizabethan clothing, especially for formal events. And so it's like paragraphs of this, I feel like. And then he's taking all those clothes. He's like, oh, finally. Oh no, there's more.
And when she talks about the books being like, it did not sound this annoying in the books.
So many layers. Anyway, so her magic's been wonky. She can't control the elements anymore. She's starting to see auras around people.
And threads in the corner.
Yeah, and he's not really sure what to make of it. Oh gosh, Felipe and Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a trip.
It felt like it was just thrown in there, like, have this thing too.
Well, I mean, granted, it is accurate time to celebrate Saturnalia, but Felipe's Saturnalia is very PG.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because it's one of the kids is Lord for the day and he gets all his stuff and the adults are gambling with beans and Felipe has a clock that explodes. Very PG. I appreciate it though that a Greek vampire would be like, and we're celebrating this too. This is loads of fun.
Yeah, I like how they mentioned that he celebrates all the old traditions too. He's like, we're doing it all.
All of it. So it is an accurate time period. It was a very PG version of what happens at Saturnalia.
Yes.
And then Yule, which is great because I was like, oh, that's what Yule is. It's one of those words you hear growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really thought about what Yule means.
Yeah.
A servant shows up and he's like, hey, so angry mob is coming to the castle because that witch is missing that you murdered. And Queen Elizabeth is demanding that Matthew show up immediately. Great. So Felipe is like, bye and whatever to Diana. And he's been switching between French and Latin and she hasn't even noticed.
Yes, that was like this big thing. He was like, you don't know anything. You know no languages.
And then by the end, he is like, oh my gosh, she's been switching back and forth. And I do not believe she actually learned those languages. I think it's a witch power, and I would love to have that witch power.
That would be really nice.
I want that witch power so badly.
She just absorbed it. Oh, that would be really useful.
But this is another thing where it's like Felipe's like, oh, don't worry. People around vampires know not to ask questions. I feel like they would want to know what happened to the bride in the wedding they celebrated for 3 days.
Let's have a huge wedding with a whole village involved.
We don't want to leave any ripples on society. Ugh. Anyway, apparently Diana's pregnant now.
Yeah, thought that couldn't happen. Just kidding. She's special and has a prophecy about her.
She even makes a joke. She's like, well, I guess it can happen the first time you have sex.
I was like, dang.
I appreciate that joke. And then you learn that, jumps to the future again, you learn that Felipe changes as a person and is more of a feminist and is starting to fund education for women, specifically looking for Diana. This is why I like Felipe.
And then the whole they leave notes for each other in the book. I was like, that's cute.
Yes. Which that goes into the time travel system. But first, real quick, vampires never change. They're stuck in the ways because they can only have secrets, except for everyone but Matthew.
Quit making excuses for him, Diana.
And Matthew, stop making excuses for him. His mom makes excuses for him. I'm like, lady, please stop being that mother-in-law.
He's a mama's boy.
But yes, there is a cute thing where they apparently leave notes in the books for each other to find. And when he died, Jezebel went through all the books to find them, but she finds another one, and Emily explains, oh, these time anomalies, you wouldn't have found this note 50 years ago because they didn't leave until a month ago, and so it just popped up because time anomaly, which confuses my brain a little bit. I guess it could also argue how the past, present, and future are concurrent and they aren't aligned like we think of them. So it's just wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yes.
String theory and time, and it's all very confusing. Anyway, that's part of the train system. You can have time anomalies pop up because they've gone to the past now.
Yeah.
Moving on. So they go to London and Diana finds a secret room in the place that they're staying. They have so many houses. Anyway, they find out the place that they're staying that there's a secret room to Knights of the Lazarus stuff. And this is the part where they're like, oh my gosh, Diana's pregnant, to the surprise of only them.
Yeah.
Diana thinks it's a boy, Matthew thinks it's a girl. That's like about where me and my husband were.
Yeah.
But I always think to agree with the mom, because she's usually right.
The mom instincts.
So because she's pregnant, Matthew insists on going back to the present. And Diana's like, okay, cool, I disagree with you, but also...
I don't know how.
How?
The whole, figuring out my magic thing just got shoved to the back burner.
Now she's like, I need to find myself. I'm like, it's a real shame you didn't do that before you broke the covenant, but I can't get mad at you because your aunts never told you about the covenant. So it's a mess to lead us here.
Yeah.
So they're back to, okay, well, we need to find a witch. So you know what Matthew does? Hangs out with his friends and buys Christmas presents.
Perfect way to find a witch, Matthew.
I hate him.
This is an anti-Matthew Royden podcast.
Yeah, and so I kind of love this. He's spending so much time with his friends, he feels bad, and he's like, you need a lady friend. You need friends. And so he sets her up with Mary Sidney, who is another historical figure. She does alchemy, and so they hang out and do alchemy stuff, and it's great. Except not in the beginning, because they're like, oh, she's a witch and vampires, and Mary Sidney's like, I don't want to know anything about it, and then they just rug sweep it.
Don't ask, don't tell. The novel.
Fine. It's probably best for Mary Sidney, but great. More rug sweeping.
And she doesn't know she's a witch until she makes something come alive off her shoe, because she's been doing wonky stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you're not normal.
Yeah. So she writes him a letter and has a scripture in it that kind of starts with, hey, we're still friends, even though you're creatures, but I'm going to pretend you're not. And also, you are being watched by Matthew's enemies. And I was like, oh.
Just throw that in there, too.
I'm not surprised, but dang. So Diana gives up on Matthew, which she should. I wish she gave up on him in more ways. But she's like, you're never going to find me a witch. So she just starts to go out and about and is going places, crowded places, looking around to be like, hey, witches, I'm here. Okay, so while she's walking around, she gets a strange pull to St. Matthew's Cathedral. Is that the cathedral where the mob boss is? The mob vampire that rules London? Because if it's not, I don't know why she had a strange magic pull to St. Paul's Cathedral.
I'm not sure. She mentioned that maybe there's an ancient temple under there.
Or it's like something ancient, and she just walks away, and I'm like, how in the world do you not investigate that?
She's like, I feel a strange pull. Whatever.
What if it's the book? You don't know where it is. Oh well. Instead, she runs into George.
George! I really like George.
And George is like, hey, you want to go to an apothecary? Well, not that apothecary.
A different one.
Silly, there's a better one. And she goes there, and that apothecary is a witch, and they have a talking in between us in our minds, where she's like, hey, I need a witch tutor. And the dude's like, hey, be careful. You don't know who's against you. The answer is him, that apothecary.
It's me, I'm against you. Haha.
And here's the thing. She wants to get to witches, right? And she knows in this time period, witches and vampires don't get along, because in her own time period, witches and vampires don't get along.
Yes.
But she's walking around announcing that she's Matthew's wife, and they know who Matthew is.
Diana, you know he hates witches.
It's not a great look.
Once again, you are so smart, but so dumb at the same time. It's astonishing.
You know, all the witches hate him. The fact that you have a vampire companion there is making them very uncomfy, and it's not really thought through. It's not great. So that doesn't work out. And, oh, by the way, witch questionings, quote unquote, have begun in England. Matthew.
Could you have picked a worse time?
And also, apparently, because we talked about werewolves, and we thought, oh, he's going to be a werewolf because he studies wolves and stuff. No, apparently werewolves are an attempt by humans to ignore that vampires exist.
Yeah, they're like, werewolves are a little more comfortable.
I would have been okay if they're like, oh, it's humans trying to make sense of vampires, but no, pretend they don't exist. Werewolves are more terrifying, frankly.
Yeah, honestly.
They're both creatures that murder people by eating their blood. Werewolves just happen to also eat their muscle and flesh.
Totally less terrifying.
I think a werewolf is actually much scarier, because they tend to be portrayed as having no no control over it in full moons and crap. That's way more terrifying. But no, it's just humans being dumb. Okay. So then you meet Mr. Mob Boss.
Mr. Hubbard.
Father Hubbard, who runs a blood cult of a bunch of different creatures, witches, demons, vampires, and I guess humans? So he runs this blood cult, and he sucks their blood and whatever, and he's like, oh, I'm your father, and you are my children, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Doesn't like the De Claremonts. The Claremonts don't like him. Got a lot of bad blood going on.
Yeah, because in his view, he runs London, and to the De Claremonts, they're like, ain't nobody's gonna tell us what to do, to which he returns, ain't nobody's gonna tell me what to do, and they just clash, and it's bad.
Yeah, and he also, I guess, kind of creepy looking.
Yeah.
Because he was dead and then got brought back, so he kind of just looks like a reanimated dead body.
And the big thing is, I'm pretty sure he had the plague.
Yeah.
So, not looking great. He wants to meet them because he's like, oh, every creature that comes into London has to be met by me, blah, 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 blah. Diana's worried that he's going to drink her blood, and then he'll learn that she has a baby.
Yeah, because that's what's really important here, not the whole time traveling part. The baby part.
I mean, okay, that, true. But I'm like, he'll know you're pregnant. He can hear the heartbeat.
Yeah, and we just have the whole conversation about, yeah, no, we can smell it and hear it, Diana.
Yeah, and didn't Felipe be like, hey, I know you're not married because I can tell by your scent you haven't consummated. They get lucky, though, and Lord Hubbard is like, oh, you had a different father, because I guess it's inconceivable to be like, oh, vampire. So, I mean, that works out for them, but yeah, it was weird.
It was very strange.
Also, Kit is part of the blood cult.
Yeah.
So you find out the apothecary that she talked to is part of the cult and told on them. But Kit is also, and this is another time where I'm like, drop Kit. He is part of the enemy. No. So it works out that they met Hubbard, though, because it's not working out her walking around and asking random witches for help.
No.
And so she's like, Hubbard, I need a witch. And Matthew's like, oh, but instead of sending a witch, he ends up sending the niece of a witch.
Annie, I mean, she is a witch. She's just a little witch.
She's 14. That's not a teacher. She needs a teacher herself.
Yeah.
And technically she's supposed to spy on them for him, and that's why he sent it.
I really like Annie. She was cute.
I do like Annie in that she is a child that is very cute. She doesn't really do too much for the plot.
No, she's just there as like a fun little character, and I appreciate it.
So she gives up on meeting a witch, even though so many things. Anyway, this is also the part where Mary gives them a gift of 2 miniature paintings and lockets, and Diana is really upset because she's like, oh, we can't leave traces on history, even though they left traces on history.
That ship has sailed a while ago.
He's gone.
Very far into its journey.
And so I get some of the other stuff, like I wouldn't have thought of the book or some other things popping up, but she's just like, oh, I'm so upset, we'll have to leave it here. And I'm like, why?
Why do you think you had to leave it in the past? Just take it with you.
You're taking the clothes on your backs, wear it.
Literally put it on.
But even if you couldn't, you could send it to Sept-Tours for safekeeping.
Yeah.
I don't understand. And then he ends up, oh, it's another time anomaly, and they're found in this random person's attic or something. I don't understand. Anyway.
And then we have, I guess, a side romance plot popping up.
I hated that. Okay, we'll get to there in a second. We need to get through this. We're like halfway. We got to keep going.
All right, I'm going to keep my comments to a minimum.
They decide to start looking for the manuscript and doing the witch thing, and they can't find the manuscript either. They're great at this. Annie is like, hey, my aunt's back in town, and she's a witch. And so they go to her, and they try to test Diana how they test everyone else. So she's supposed to light a candle, and that doesn't work. And so Susanna leaves, and she's like, hey, crack an egg into a bowl without your hands. Figure it out.
If you can't do this, you're not worth my time.
Yeah, instead of that, she hatches the egg into a chick. And Susanna's like, hold up.
This is unexpected.
Yeah. So then the time anomaly with Marcus, where side romance. There's a Phoebe, and she's working at this fancy place, and Marcus is a whatever. And Phoebe's just outwardly rude to him, even though she knows it's an important client. How to get fired so fast.
Yeah.
So she's being kind of rude to him. And then at the end, Marcus is like, hey, I'm taking you on a date.
Yes. And it's like, what? Huh?
Don't flirt with women at their workplace. And he's really forward about it and pushing it. And he's like, you have to do it. I'm like, great. I like Marcus less now. It's very gross and predatory.
Don't we get the whole book with him?
So there's a 4th book. And yes, it is about Marcus, according to the synopsis.
Oh boy. Okay.
Anyway, apparently it works out. We find out later that they're a whole love story. Fine. We're going to ignore all of that.
Yes.
But apparently they're a really cute match and whatever. Okay, fine. It works out. That's great. It was weird and not romantic at all. Anyway, So because she has those powders, we finally meet Goody Asloff.
I think it's all Sept. That's how my book was saying it.
And I'm just dyslexic.
You're fine.
So she explains the magic system and is like, hey, we have to do all this stuff. And they do magic stuff and they find all these different elemental witches to help her because she has a mixture of different elements. She can control fire and water, which is very unique because mostly you can only do one, and fire and water are opposites, which makes me wonder if there's an air earth one. But anyway, they do this ritual. I'm going to just skip a lot here.
Yes, if you want to know more, read the book.
They're like, hey, we're going to do this ritual, and once you cast your first spell, you're going to get your familiar of some sort.
I thoroughly enjoyed the familiar.
In between this, she randomly adopts an urchin. I feel like mentioning that because he doesn't really have anything to do with the plot ever again.
Jack! He was just another fun little side character, and I thoroughly enjoyed him as well.
He has nightmares. That never got resolved, but oh well. Sucks to suck, Jack. Also, now you're a part of Father Hubbard's group. I don't know why you didn't just send him to Felipe for safe cares, or heck, take him to one of the 5,000 estates. Apparently, after this, Matthew goes to Scotland and doesn't come back for a really long time, so you could have very easily kept him safe and didn't have to give your blood to Father Hubbard, but fine. Diana's an idiot. That rant aside, never talking about him again.
I really liked the Fire Drake, who we later find out is Cora. I love her.
So she casts the spell, and hey, her familiar turns out to be a fire drake. A very unruly one. Yes. She has attitude and panache.
The sassy counterpart of Diana.
It's great. Also, as soon as they are like, hey, you're pregnant, she's like, yeah, she has a miscarriage.
Yeah. Just kidding. Never mind. Dang.
That sucks. That legitimately sucks for anyone. That would be really not great.
Yeah, and then Matthew's out here is consumed with his own grief. My guy, your wife just lost a kid, but whatever. All about you, right?
And I hate this. Matthew and Marlowe start hanging out again. And he's staying out late to drink Marlowe's blood. And I'm sorry, I don't care what Diana says. That is cheating. He is absolutely cheating on Diana with Marlowe.
Yeah.
But she lets it. And I get it. That's really hard. That is really hard. But I have no beliefs that it was harder on Matthew than Diana.
You would think he would have developed coping mechanisms. Clearly not.
He has no coping mechanism. It's just, I don't believe with the pregnancy hormones, and this was first trimester, so they're shooting up. And then to lose the baby, but still have the hormones. I do not believe this was worse on Matthew than Diana. But Diana gets nothing. She gets to be left alone at home to do nothing while Matthew's out there drinking Marlowe's blood.
Oh, poor me. Woe is me. Your wife just miscarried. Can you go help her?
No, I hate it. I hate that they keep bringing Marlowe. He's stringing Marlowe along. I have issues.
Matthew is just very problematic, and I don't like him.
Also, she's not supposed to leave a trace on history, but she convinces a goldsmith to create a rat trap.
The fanciest rat trap. That was pretty funny.
I can't. But in better news, George found the manuscript. Apparently, this guy named Dr. D, historical figure that I know very little about, had the manuscript, but ended up trading it with something for a manuscript of another equally mysterious type, aka it was stolen from him, and the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire stole it and gave him another weird book he didn't understand.
Yes, and his assistant, Edward Kelly.
But before they can do anything about that, Elizabeth calls Matthew and is like, hey, I didn't approve of you getting married, which is very controlling.
Yes.
So she's mad about it, but they make up, and then she's like, well, I need you to go and get my alchemist back because Dr. D had a assistant. The assistant stayed in the Holy Roman Empire. There are now rumors that he can create the Philosopher's Stone. And so she's like, well, you need to bring him back there because the Holy Roman Empire can't have that power. So off they go.
After they had to talk the queen into letting Diana go as well.
Yeah.
Because she was about to be like, no, you have to stay here with me.
Yeah, and at the end of that one, Vernon, another de Clermont, finds an alchemical manuscript with DR notes. So like Diana Royden. And I was just like, hi, Vernon. You weren't important enough to mention in the last book, but welcome to the family.
Family tree just keeps getting bigger, man.
She was one of the blood daughters of Felipe, and he was always like, oh, there's a time-spinning witch, but Vernon didn't believe him until she saw that. There's a newspaper article about it, I think.
And then called the Knights of Lazarus and was like, oh, it's true.
Yes, and Vernon told me this. Either nobody knows what Vernon's up to, but creatures aren't allowed to be married to each other, but she's a vampire married to a human.
Yeah, maybe the congregation was just like, whatever.
I feel like there are way more cracks than the congregation wishes is there to beat? So they go to Prague, and I was really excited. Cool. I don't know anything about Prague. That's why I'm not super interested in Elizabethan, because I feel like it's oversaturated in our stuff. That's the place people go. I know less about Queen Victoria than I do about Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, cool. I don't know a lot about the Holy Roman Empire. Really exciting.
And we still don't.
We still don't. All it turns into, all Prague is the Emperor likes Diana.
Yes.
And harasses her.
Yeah, it really just turns into Rudolph being the most annoying character. I like him even less than I like Matthew.
He just sexually harasses Diana for a whole part until it's too much and they run away.
He's like a petulant child.
Yeah. I am going to skip most of Prague.
That's it summed up. They find the book. Edward Kelly's not stable. The book talks. Then they go steal it, and then the 3 pages disappear.
Yeah, so here's the thing. They find the book, they look at the pages, so they're able to look at the pages that they don't know about. And there's stuff like, oh, that's a fire drake and stuff. So there's 3 pages. They know what they look like now. They can't really study them. They have to leave. They run away for some reason. They can't keep the book. By the time they get back to steal it, the assistant has torn the 3 pages out and apparently sent to 3 people and has kind of lost his mind. Because they figured this out.
Oh, yes.
Ashmole 782 is people.
Creatures. Skin, bone, blood, hair.
Literally, the leather is made from skin.
The ink is blood.
The binding is hair.
I didn't quite figure out where the bone came from, but that was mentioned.
I think it had to do with something on the front of it.
Okay.
There's some sort of emblem, I think.
Oh, backtracking. The only reason Rudolph is going so hard after Diana, they've, I guess, told him that the marriage is fake.
Okay, so Matthew's like, hey, I'm married. But they've been kind of wishy-washy going back and forth with it. Because to some people, she's my wife. And then some people, nah. And so the congregation thinks they're not married. And so Rudolph II gets it from the congregation that he's just protecting her for Knights of the Lazarus reasons, but they're not really married. And so he thinks she's single, even though they really go out of their way to be like, hey, we're actually in love. But that's beside the point. There's a whole play anyway. A lot of, hey, you're keeping secrets from me. Well, you're keeping secrets from me. Anyway. So it's made of people, and I'm way more interested in this. But no, we're not going to talk about this. Once again, what this book should have been is way more about alchemical stuff and the fact that the book is creatures and that it has evil origins, and everyone's like, oh, it's going to solve the world. It's like, no, how do you know that it's not going to cause problems? I feel like it's causing problems. It's evil.
There are issues.
It's literally evil. And I feel like everyone's put their hopes on it. It's like, oh, it's going to tell us the origins of witches and have the original spells, and it's going to tell us how vampires were created. I'm like, even if it did, I don't think you're going to like the answers.
Yeah, right. Like, you already freaked out when you could tell it was made from people.
Yeah.
How do you think the rest is going to go? Not well.
Yeah, but of the 3 pages, one of them, like the 3rd page, supposedly has a dragon, but it's not. It's a snake and a fire drake, and it's apparently another symbol that they're going to have children. And then there was a tree made of people, which was kind of a hint, nudge, nudge. This book is people.
Yeah.
So that's the 2 pages that they were missing. The fire drake and the snake and the tree made of people.
Yeah.
But now, once again, the pages are lost.
Just get ripped out. Yep.
And so they can't read the secret writing that was there because the words are running around looking for the 3 pages. I don't know. It works. Go with it. So they go back to London, and Queen Elizabeth is pissed off at them because they kind of screwed things up with Rudolph II.
Just a little. Poor 16th century Matthew having to come back to this. Good luck.
Oh my gosh. That's the thing. Like, Elizabeth doesn't owe them crap. How is she not going to write and be like, where's your wife? I can't with them. Anyway, somehow Matthew rushes it over. They had to travel really fast to get out of there so Rudolph II wouldn't be mad at it. I don't remember what they did to insult him. They insulted him by Diana not sleeping with him, whatever.
He couldn't get the girl he wanted, so he was mad.
So they have to run back. Diana's exhausted at this point, and Matthew's like, hey, I'm going to chill with the queen a little bit longer, I guess, whatever. And so Annie takes her to Matthew's private quarters in Elizabeth's castle. He has so many beds that he doesn't sleep in.
Yeah.
Except for sometimes. Sometimes he sleeps. She gets there, and Kit is waiting for her, right?
Yeah.
Right? So she sends Annie away.
It's not suspicious at all. The man who's been openly disliking you this entire time.
And trying to thwart you and works with Father Hubbard and spreads rumors about you to get you run out of Woodstock. So he's writing a poem in her room about how much he's upset that Matthew doesn't love him anymore. And first Diana's alone with him. And then she decides to recite the poem he's writing to him.
Freak him out even more.
Yes, which, granted, Kit, she's from the future. You know she's from the future. She probably read it. But he's like, no, you're witch mind control, blah, 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 blah. Although I do have to mention, I'm impressed that, first of all, she knows exactly the poem. But second of all, she had it memorized to begin with.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
That is impressive.
Although I feel like that's a don't. He's like, hey, let's totally take a walk together. It's fun. Let's go outside to the jousting area. I want to show you stuff. It's totally fine, guys.
And Diana goes with him because you know what? He's just all of a sudden forgiven her.
She's an idiot. No self-preservation. I'm so glad other people in the book are like, you suck.
Oh, no self-preservation. She's gullible.
She wants to think the best of people.
And it gets her in danger several times.
In all the trouble. I don't want to say you're stupid for that because that's a very nice thing to do, but
think about it.
At this point with Kit, all the malice he's done, bad idea. You don't have to hate him.
Maybe think, does he really have my best interest in mind?
Anyway, so now he's working with Louisa, and he's convinced Louisa that she has mind control and is mind controlling Matthew.
And Louisa hates witches.
And so Diana's like, well, you can just literally go talk to Matthew. He's right in there. Go talk to him. But they were like, no, that's a terrible idea.
And it's Louisa, who famously hates witches, is also high from Kit's blood.
Yeah, she gets Kit high, but giving him something, probably.
Poppy, it's like opium.
Probably opium.
Because she said poppy several times. I'm like, isn't that opium?
Yes. And so then she drinks his blood. So they're both high.
Kit's got some blood loss going on.
And it's kind of a very weird intimacy because she takes from his neck, which is apparently like a dominance thing.
Yeah.
Anyway. But instead of killing her, they joust for her?
Yes.
Because Kit's like, oh, we should take out her eyeballs.
And he needs her eyeballs to, like, break the spell, or so someone has told him.
Yeah, but they're like, okay, so we could do that, or we could joust to see who gets to kill her.
Yeah, and whoever gets the closest hit gets her.
And hit her. They're trying to impale her.
Which is gonna kill her.
By this point, she's been kidnapped by all three creatures. I thought they were going to do one per book, because last book it was the witches. But this time it's vampire and Damon.
Doubled up.
Just going ahead.
Yeah.
So, thankfully, she's a weaver, and she's able to see the threads and use her dragon familiar.
Yeah, because they blindfolded her.
Yeah, so gray smoke causes confusion, and she breaks out of her ropes because weaving and starts to fly. And so she's flying on her fire drake. And Annie shows up just in time to see some really messed up. But Diana imprisons them with her blood by the black tree. Anyway, she imprisons them. That's the important thing.
Somehow, yeah.
And apparently you learned that Gerbert, who's a vampire part of the congregation in the present, gave Yezebo a prophecy about the children of the night being destroyed by a child of lion and wolf blood. And Diana's an idiot.
Yes.
And thinks that means, oh, Felipe and Matthew. And I'm like, honey, you're the lion.
Yes.
But this is when Matthew, who's been taking his very sweet time, shows up. And I said I wouldn't mention Jack again. I'll mention Jack again because the only reason he doesn't outright murder them right there is Jack is there and he's like, nightmare crap. Matthew's been up at night with him. Hey, I'll be with you till you get through being scared of your monsters. And so Jack is like, I'll stay with you until your nightmare passes. And I'm like, oh, my heart is so sweet.
Yeah, that was really sweet. I was like, oh, couldn't you have just taken Jack back to the future with you?
No, he would have a heart attack with the amount of improvement.
I know they couldn't.
Physically, it would murder him how much has changed.
Yeah, but he's so cute.
Yeah, and she hands him over to Father Hubbard. Ugh.
I know. I was like, why would you think that was a good idea, Diana?
Just give it back to Felipe. There's a whole town.
Let Pierre keep him.
Yeah. So instead of murdering them, Matthew locks them up in a jail area, whatever. A dungeon.
A very big mix of things, which I think is an actual place where they went. A well-known asylum.
Yes, it is. So Hubbard shows up and is like, hey, you know how your husband's trying to make everything better with the witch trials? He's actually making things worse. And I appreciate this with the author because a lot of times I feel like people look at time travel as an event. And they're like, oh, if I could go back in time, I would change this. Like, I would kill Hitler. I would go back and do an event. When in reality, you're not fighting events. You're fighting intentions.
Yes, which is really cool.
So him going out and saving 2 witches does not change the fact that James, the King of Scotland, has it in his heart the intention of hunting down witches.
Yes.
Even though Matthew's doing what he can to try to save these witches, it doesn't change the fact I want to murder witches.
Yeah, but it's also making everyone suspicious that Matthew is coming and is now suddenly saving witches because 16th century Matthew hated them.
Yes. And he's about to come back and still hate them.
Yeah. They're like, whoa, dude, you good?
So Hubbard and her go to Bedlam, which is the place that they're being kept, and Diana manages to convince Matthew to let one of their vampires, Gallowglass, we haven't mentioned by name, he's awesome, I love him, he's amazing, Gallowglass to take care of Louisa, and Hubbard take care of Kit, because they've been receiving no treatment, and I think he's been torturing them, frankly.
Yeah, I feel like that's what was implied.
So that happens, whatever, take care of that plot line. So one last twist while we're at it, they're just walking around one day, and Diana's dad appears.
Yeah, just like, what? Huh?
Fun.
I mean, I guess Matthew got to see his dad, so now Diana gets to see hers.
I guess so. Stephen, not Bishop. He has his own last name. But he is the only sane person. The dads have got it. Felipe's got Matthew's number, and Stephen's got Diana's number. He's like, you have been in the past for how long?
And you've definitely made changes here.
Okay, so this is where I die on the inside. They came back to the past specifically for Ashmole 782 to bring it back to the future. And he's like, hey, so you can't do that. You have to leave it here in the past. And I'm like, we came here for nothing.
Yeah.
It kind of works out because Diana was able to learn about weaving because there was a weaver back then, and apparently witches are killing weavers, and so they're not really there in the present. But they could have gone into the past to learn it from her dad. You didn't have to come to this time period.
And I guess she didn't know her dad time traveled or something.
She knew he time walked. She didn't know he was a weaver. So that's fair. But nothing. We gained nothing. Except Diana can kind of use her magic now, which is nice, but I feel like you could have done that in so many other time periods.
Yeah.
But he helps her overcome some of her weaving fears, because apparently she's had weaving fears. I don't know. She was really excited. And then they went to Prague, and then she wasn't practicing. And then they came back, and he was like, hey, you have weaver fears, apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
So it works out. And he helps her get to know her familiar.
Cora.
So they spend time for like 2 weeks. And then he's like, hey, Diana, you should totally do the festival with Matthew. And Diana's like, no, I want to spend time with you. He's like, no, go do it with Matthew. And of course he leaves. But she's shocked that he's left without a proper goodbye. And I'm like, I don't know if he could have.
Yeah, only her.
And she's mad at him for being like, so does X and X happen in the future? Because obviously he knows that he dies, his prophecy.
Yeah, because her mom has second sight and all that too.
So he's asking all these questions. He's trying to be safe about it. He can't know too much about the future and about you and what happens to him specifically. She has a hard time with her dad.
Yeah. She's like, why is he asking me about baseball and all these things? And Matthew's like, that's what a dad asks his daughter when she grows up.
Wants to know if you're still into baseball.
He knows that he's not going to get to see that.
They go on a date, the first date that they have ever had, and is actually very cute, and I do appreciate that, but I also hate that we've been robbed of that.
Yeah.
We just skipped to being married with no romance whatsoever, and I'm mad about it. You could have done it. You could have managed very cute moments between them, but we don't get that until the end of the second book, and I wanted more. So her dad leaves, like a responsible time traveler, but instead she insists on saying proper goodbyes to everyone, which works out because Goody Aslop is like, hey, there's a 10th knot. I can't do it, but maybe you can, which of course Diana's going to be able to do it.
Yeah, of course.
That's when Diana begs Hubbard to protect Jack and gives him a piece of her blood, and he's like, goodbye, Miss Bishop, and knows her future name, and she's like, well, great, now he has some memories of mine. I'm like, that's going to come up in the third book, and you could have just sent him to Pierre.
Yeah.
Or one of the thousands of homes that you have across the globe. Fine, whatever.
Yeah, it's gonna come back up.
We learned all the sad endings for the School of Night, that Walter gets a girl pregnant and then doesn't claim her but marries her and gets in trouble.
He's basically disgraced for the rest of his life. The baby dies.
Diana changes the past, and there's a guy named Tom. There's an astrologer that Jack's hanging out with there. I mentioned him again. And he's like, oh, I could totally make a telescope. And Diana's like, so we're doing it. We're doing it right now. And that apparently changed. I don't know enough about telescope history to understand how that has changed things.
I don't know.
Diana runs into a little girl named Rebecca Bishop, who's apparently a great ancestor of hers. And so in the first book, Diana finds an earring of Ysabeau, and she's like, weird, how did that get here? And I don't understand that, because time anomalies happen after they've time traveled, but apparently her ancestor got a hold of Ysabeau's earring, and so she gives the earring to Rebecca Bishop and is like, hey, hold on to this, I'm going to ask for it one day. And supposedly that's how it gets back to her, but that's not how the anomalies work. Anyway, moving on. She runs into Kit again, and she's like, hey, Matthew, you should forgive him. Why?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, because yourself never sees Kit again. He's going to come back, immediately go to Scotland, and Kit's going to get murdered not too long from now because of a duel. I get being like, I know they have feelings in the past, but it's completely all right to be like, wow, you are actually insanely selfish and a bad friend. They don't need to make up for the past's sake. That's so unhealthy.
Yeah, Diana, you can't fix everyone.
And so they make up, and it's gross, and I hate it. I'm glad that they call him Kit and not Marlowe more often. Otherwise, I think I would have a problem with Marlowe, and it not be his fault at all. Even though he's an extremely polarizing figure if you actually study him.
Yeah.
Anyway, they manage to cast a spell to leave. They get back. The telescope and the mousetrap get discovered. And you find out, oh, by the way, Emily was murdered.
Yeah, I was sitting there and that bomb is dropped. And I was like, that wasn't mentioned in the last book.
No.
It's just like all of a sudden Sarah's depressed and Isabel's like, how are you feeling? And she's like, well, nothing's going to bring Emily back. And I was like, what? What happened?
Yeah, apparently she was murdered protecting Margaret, which is the baby of the daemon who is actually a witch. So they get back to that. They go join up with them. They learn nothing. They don't learn about Emily. They don't learn about Marcus and his girlfriend. I don't even know. And the final anomaly is Annie finding the Diana chess piece. Marlowe gives her the chess piece because that's another thing that they use to get back in the time period. And Hubbard makes a weird remark here saying, hey, you should go work for Shakespeare. And he's like, well, maybe that'll get Shakespeare to not fall in love with someone else. But this takes place in 1593 and he married Anne Hathaway in 1582. Because I thought it was like, oh, is this saying that she's Anne Hathaway? No, I'm confused there.
Yeah, the dates are a little off.
Anyway, and Shakespeare gets a paper from Marlowe. And it's basically claiming that Shakespeare stole a line from Marlowe and used it in his poem, Love's Labour's Lost.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's why School of Night exists, even though School of Night is a modern term to refer to them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's the end of the book. There we go. We did it. General thoughts. I forgot how long her chapters are. 4 freaking ever. 30 pages.
And this book itself was very long.
It's so long. Speaking of this being forever long, there are so many characters.
I was just scrolling through your list of characters.
I normally list every named character, but I had to stop.
We got to, quadruple Z, and you were just like, no. 3, 4, 5, 6. 6.
Almost 12 pages of names, and I didn't get them all.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters, and they were just drop in, drop out characters.
In contrast, just to give some ideas, I had less pages. All of them. Characters, plot, general thoughts, all of that. I had less pages for the entirety of the episode before this, which is extras. I had 11 pages of everything for that book. But this book has almost 12 pages of just names. And granted, little notes so I remember who the heck they are. But still, 12 pages. And that is not everyone mentioned because I had to stop. It is people that show up.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that there are so many characters, but also why?
So many characters. She loves giving everybody names. And I have to write them all down because I don't know if they're important later. Ah!
Right. Character just bloop and then never come back and you're like... Like all the witches she met.
So there's so many of those, but then there are minor characters in the last book that get mentioned in this book.
Yeah.
And you have to know who they are. Cry. Let's just get through this. One question for the author. Why not more time travel? Because I have been told the next book takes place in the present again.
Yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy the time travel. I would have appreciated a second book of it.
If that's her specialty, being a doctor of history, why not more time travel? Why is there an entire book in the present, a book in the past, and then another book in the present? I feel like she could do more. And I feel like that's why she did Marcus's book, to be like, hey, more history.
Yeah.
I'm curious, unless there is time travel in the next book, but I know it's not as huge as this one, so I'm just curious.
I think it would be fun to see more time travel, even if it was just a little side story.
It's her strength. History is her strength. I would love to hear her thoughts and her outline thoughts on that.
Why did she pick Elizabethan England? Not why, because I disliked it, but what made her as the author choose that time period?
It's probably her specialty.
I mean, it could have been her specialty, but then she knew so much about Saturnalia and the ancient Greek customs and stuff.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they have gone back earlier?
Yeah. I guess that also ties into my question, because that's why I'm like, why not more time travel? Why not more places? I enjoyed seeing Prague. That was fun.
I enjoyed Prague. If we didn't have Rudolph, it would have been better.
I mean, except Rudolph, yeah. So not as excited about Prague when I really think about it. But when she described the city, I was like, I kind of want to visit this.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really get to see France.
No, we really just got to see Sept-Tours. It makes me wonder why they picked then and why not when the book was initially made. Why not go back to that time point?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if she could have. Well, because you had to have 3 things from a time period. Granted, I will say for that, finding 3 items from that time period would be next to impossible. But yeah, I could see how they could keep going back in time. Maybe Felipe has 3 things from his childhood, so they can go to ancient Greece. And now that they're in ancient Greece, they can find 3 things. You keep going back, chasing that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it'd be fun. Why'd you have to make me like Philippe so much? Now I'm sad.
Right?
I really liked Philippe.
Also, Stephen.
Oh, and they talk about Diana just oh yeah, you time traveled on your 3rd birthday, gave your mom a heart attack. Just drop that in there. What?
I think they mentioned that in the first book.
Maybe.
I think I remember that. Sarah being like, oh yeah, we knew you could time travel because you did this. Rating. History class out of 10.
Yeah.
Your mileage will vary given if you like the history being taught.
Yeah.
So if you like the history, you're going to love it. If you don't like the history, it's probably not going to be your favorite.
Yeah. I gave it a Back to the Future out of 10. Very much just got Back to the Future sort of vibes from it. Minus the cool car, but still.
Diana is no Marty McFly.
No, but just the whole don't mess with history.
And Matthew is no Doc Knight.
No.
Granted, I guess that should be reversed. Diana is no Doc Knight, and Matthew is no Marty McFly.
No, not at all. And there is no cool car.
Read again. No, it is too long.
No.
It is so long.
I would maybe pick and choose chapters to read again. I would reread Sept-Tours.
The time commitment, because this took over a month of me consistently sitting down, being like, I have to get chapters done. Every single day, sitting down, being like, I have to do this. Which also probably lessens the enjoyment, but I wasn't going to get through this any other way.
No, I will say the audiobook did save me on this one.
I'm jealous. Favorite in the series so far? I would pick this one.
Yes.
I think Shadow of the Night is much better than A Discovery of Witches.
Oh, I totally agree.
Definitely plays more to her strengths.
Yeah.
Witchers are way more interesting than the vampires.
Yes.
And she's not describing every meal they eat. She actually spreads it out. She does talk a lot about food and outfits.
And every wine with its weird flavors.
Oh, I didn't talk about how I think it's a cop-out that Matthew drinks her blood and she third sights all his memories so they don't have communication problems anymore.
Loopholes, woo!
Throw that in there. That's such a cop-out and I hate it. But I guess I'm glad it's over. Double-edged sword there.
Yeah, they didn't communicate like real adults, but at least there's not childish fights anymore.
We won't have that plot point going forward because I'm just tired. I'm mad at both of them. I'm mad at Diana for demanding secrets. I'm mad at Matthew for keeping them. It needed to stop. So I guess I'm happy, question mark.
Yes, happy but annoyed.
It's like when someone does something and then gets out of it by magic. That's kind of how I feel. It feels cheap, cop out.
Yeah.
But whatever, fine. It's done. We're done. This is done. But have you read this book? What time period do you think they should have gone to? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Shadow of Night with us. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Hannah Rossell.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.